Jessica Fletcher and the Murder in Mapleview Cottage. Chapter 1. The Artist's Retreat. Jessica Fletcher adjusted her scarf as she stepped off the small bus that had taken her through the winding, snow-dusted roads of Elmridge Hollow. Her breath formed tiny clouds in the crisp winter air, and she pulled her coat tighter against the biting chill. It had been years since she had last seen Clara Dunning, her old friend and watercolorist, but when Clara had sent her an invitation to join a weekend retreat at the newly restored Mapleview Cottage, Jessica couldn't resist. It seemed like the perfect opportunity to escape the bustle of everyday life and enjoy a quiet time in the countryside. Little did she know, this serene retreat would soon unravel into a mystery she could never have imagined. The cottage, nestled in the heart of a forest clearing, was a charming Victorian structure. Its gray stone walls stood firm against the snowy landscape, with smoke curling from a chimney and warm golden light flickering from within. A decorative wooden sign near the entrance read, Mapleview Cottage, Artist's Residency. The garden, covered in snow, held the remains of last summer's flowers, their shapes still visible beneath the blanket of white. Clara, beaming as always, greeted Jessica with a warm hug on the front steps. "Jessica, how wonderful to see you. I'm so glad you could make it." Clara was a tall woman in her late 50s, her silver hair often tied in a loose bun. Her clothes were as artistic as her paintings, flowing scarves and earth-toned dresses, always vibrant and full of life. "It's been far too long, Clara," Jessica said, smiling warmly. She accepted the invitation inside, where the warmth of the fire greeted her, along with the unmistakable smell of fresh pine and wood. The main room was cozy, with paintings on every wall, some abstract, others landscapes, each telling its own story. "There's someone I want you to meet," Clara said, her voice bubbling with excitement as she led Jessica into the sitting room. "The retreat is in full swing this year, and I'm sure you'll enjoy meeting the others." In the center of the room stood a tall, thin man, hunched slightly as he worked intently on a marble bust. His face, pale from hours of sculpting, looked almost as though it were carved itself. Julian Drake, the famous sculptor, was lost in his art, unaware of their entrance. His studio apron, splattered with chalk dust and dark smudges, only added to his intense persona. "Julian, this is Jessica Fletcher," Clara introduced, her voice as warm as ever, though she couldn't entirely mask the tension in her tone. "She's a dear old friend and an excellent detective in her own right." Julian looked up from his work, his eyes sharp and penetrating, yet his smile did not quite reach them. "A pleasure, Miss Fletcher. If you ever find yourself in need of some inspiration, you'll find none better than the works here at Mapleview. I do hope you enjoy your time." Jessica gave him a polite smile, but couldn't help but notice his aloof nature. He seemed to possess an aura of discomfort, as though he preferred to keep others at arm's length. Clara, noticing Jessica's raised brow, quickly continued, "Julian's been with us for years. His work is revolutionary, of course. He's done everything from monumental sculptures to intricate figurines. We're lucky to have him here." Next, Clara turned toward a tall woman sitting by the fire, a journal resting open in her lap. Olivia Fielding, the poet, glanced up from her writing and stood, offering a warm handshake. Her raven-black hair was swept into an elegant updo, and she wore a dress that looked as though it had been carefully chosen for the occasion, delicate, simple, yet striking. "Welcome, Miss Fletcher. I'm Olivia. I trust Clara has given you the grand tour." Olivia's voice was smooth, but there was a certain sharpness to it that Jessica quickly picked up on. "Not yet, but I'm sure I'll be delighted to see more of your work," Jessica replied. The final person in the room was Nathan Reese, a landscape painter with a brooding demeanor. He was in his early 30s, with a dark beard that gave him an air of mystery. Nathan didn't approach as the others had, but instead, he nodded silently from his place at the window, gazing out at the snow-covered landscape as if lost in thought. "Ah, Nathan, my quiet artist," Clara remarked with a playful tone, though Jessica noted there was something undeniably tense between Clara and him. "He's working on a series of nature paintings. He's a bit of a recluse, but you'll get to know him, I'm sure." Jessica smiled politely and offered a friendly wave to Nathan, though he didn't acknowledge her presence. She couldn't help but wonder about the group's dynamic. Each person seemed so different from the next, yet there was an underlying sense of tension in the room. The air felt thick with unspoken words, as if each person was harboring some secret. A soft barking from the adjoining room broke the silence, and Clara laughed. "Ah, that must be Alice. She's the caretaker here, the one who tends to the grounds and helps with anything we need. She's an absolute gem." Alice Munro, a young woman in her late 20s with bright eyes and an infectious smile, entered the room. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore a simple but sturdy sweater and jeans. Despite her casual attire, she held herself with the grace of someone used to running a household. After the introductions, Clara led everyone to the dining area, where a fire crackled in the hearth. The table was set with candles, glasses of wine, and a hearty meal of roasted chicken, potatoes, and salad. Jessica felt her shoulders relax as she took a seat, eager to catch up with Clara and meet the others more thoroughly over dinner. As the evening progressed, the conversation turned to the art world, the struggles of artists to be recognized, and the challenges of finding inspiration in isolation. Clara spoke of her passion for watercolor landscapes. Olivia shared excerpts from her latest poem, and Julian discussed his latest sculpture, a haunting piece titled The Secret Within. Jessica listened, intrigued by their stories but unable to ignore the underlying tension that seemed to simmer beneath the surface. There was something about this place, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. She wondered, as the evening wore on, whether this retreat would truly be as peaceful as it seemed, or if Mapleview Cottage held more than just creativity within its walls. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, as the night deepened. The storm trapped them all in the cottage, but Jessica had no idea that this quiet evening would soon give way to a mystery unlike any she had encountered before. Chapter 2. A Note in the Night. The storm outside intensified as Jessica made her way to her room, her thoughts lingering on the unusual mix of personalities she had encountered at Mapleview Cottage. The night had settled into a strange, uneasy quiet. Snow continued to swirl violently against the windows, and the wind howled as if it wanted to speak its own dark secrets. The warmth inside the cottage was comforting, but the tension in the air was palpable. She settled into the small, cozy bedroom Clara had arranged for her, the fire in the hearth crackling merrily. The room was decorated simply, with floral wallpaper and dark wooden furniture that added to the quaint charm of the place. She dropped her suitcase on the bed, then moved toward the window to take in the view of the snow-covered grounds. A distant figure passed by in the garden, but it was too dark to make out any details. Jessica wondered if it was Alice, taking a late stroll, or perhaps checking on something in the yard. Her thoughts turned back to the dinner, and the odd undercurrents she had sensed in the group. Julian's cold aloofness, Olivia's guarded confidence, Nathan's brooding silence. All of them seemed to have something to hide. And then there was Clara. She had invited Jessica here with an almost desperate eagerness, though her eyes had occasionally clouded with worry when she spoke of the artist's retreat. Jessica sighed and sat at the small writing desk by the window, pulling out her notebook and reviewing her observations. She wrote down the names of everyone she had met: Julian Drake, the sculptor; Olivia Fielding, the poet; Nathan Reese, the painter; Alice Munro, the caretaker; and Clara Dunning, her old friend and host. Each person was more complex than they appeared, and Jessica's trained instincts told her that this retreat would not be as simple as it had seemed. A loud knock at the door startled her, and she rose quickly to answer it. "Jessica." Clara's voice came through the door, soft and worried. "Can I come in?" "Of course," Jessica replied, opening the door to find Clara standing in the dimly lit hallway, her hand pressed against the door frame as if seeking support. Her eyes were wide, and there was a tremor in her voice. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but I found something," Clara said, her voice trembling with urgency. "It's about Julian." Jessica motioned for Clara to come inside, her curiosity piqued. Clara entered the room and closed the door behind her, her eyes darting around as though she expected someone to be lurking in the shadows. "What happened?" Jessica asked, guiding Clara to sit down at the desk. Clara hesitated, wringing her hands together. "It's just strange. After dinner, I went to check on Julian. He's been working on that sculpture of his all week, and I thought he might need a break. But when I knocked on his door, there was no answer. I went in, and the room was locked. But it wasn't just locked from the outside. It felt like someone had been in there and left quickly." Jessica's brow furrowed as she listened closely. "What do you mean?" What did you find? Clara took a deep breath before continuing. I found something in the studio. A note. It was tucked behind the sculpture he's been working on. It was written in a hurry, and the handwriting wasn't Julian's. I don't know who wrote it, but it says, "The stage hides more than music." Jessica's heart skipped a beat. Did you keep the note? Clara nodded. Yes, I've locked it away in my drawer. I was going to show it to you tomorrow, but after thinking about it, I couldn't wait. Jessica rose from her seat and walked to Clara's side. Where did you find it? Clara stood as well, leading Jessica down the hallway to the small studio at the end of the corridor. The door was slightly ajar, and the air inside smelled of dust and marble. Julian's sculpture stood in the center of the room, half-finished and eerily lifelike. The note Clara had found was tucked behind a small pedestal, almost hidden from view. Jessica unfolded the crumpled note, inspecting the words carefully. The handwriting was indeed unfamiliar, slanted and hurried, as though the writer had been in a rush. The words sent a shiver down her spine. The stage hides more than music. It's cryptic, Jessica murmured, glancing around the room. And unsettling. But why would someone leave it here? And why Julian? Clara wrung her hands again. That's what's bothering me. Julian isn't the type to keep secrets, but lately, he's been so distant. He's hardly spoken to anyone since we got here. His temper has been worse, and he's been acting strangely, almost paranoid. But I don't understand why anyone would target him like this. Jessica looked at the unfinished sculpture, her eyes narrowing. Something about the scene didn't sit right with her. We need to look deeper, Clara. If someone is trying to send a message, then there's more to this retreat than meets the eye. Clara nodded but looked apprehensive. What should we do now? Jessica considered the options carefully. We need to speak with everyone. Olivia, Nathan, and Alice. We need to find out if anyone else has seen anything unusual or knows anything about this note. Clara hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. I'll gather them. But Jessica, please, be careful. I have a feeling something is very wrong here. Jessica gave her friend a reassuring smile. Don't worry, Clara. I'll get to the bottom of this. As the storm continued to rage outside, Jessica's instincts were on high alert. The storm had trapped them inside, but the danger, she feared, was already inside Mapleview Cottage with them. Chapter 3. The Locked Practice Room. The following morning, Jessica awoke to the sound of the wind still howling against the windows. The snowstorm showed no signs of abating, its icy fingers pressing against the walls of Mapleview Cottage. It felt as though the house itself was being swallowed by the storm. Jessica lay awake for a while, her mind racing with questions that needed answers. The cryptic note left behind in Julian's studio echoed in her thoughts. The stage hides more than music. Her instincts told her that the strange message was only the beginning. Julian's aloofness, the tension in the group, and now the cryptic note all pointed to something sinister lurking beneath the surface of this tranquil retreat. After breakfast, which was a quiet affair with Clara, Olivia, and Nathan, Jessica decided it was time to inspect Julian's practice room. It was the one place she hadn't yet had a chance to explore, and it seemed like the next logical step. Clara had been worried about him the night before, but there was something about the locked studio that didn't sit right with Jessica. If someone had been inside, it wasn't just to leave a note. There might be more to uncover. Clara, who had been quietly nursing a cup of tea by the fire, looked up as Jessica stood. Are you going to see Julian? Jessica nodded. I need to check something. I won't be long. Clara's face clouded with concern, but she didn't try to stop Jessica. I'll keep an eye on the others. Be careful. Jessica gave her a reassuring smile and made her way down the long, creaky hallway toward Julian's studio. The heavy wooden door was shut tight, but it wasn't locked. Jessica turned the handle and pushed it open, stepping inside. The studio was dim, only the weak light from a single overhead bulb illuminating the cluttered room. A large marble bust, halfway completed, sat on a pedestal in the center of the room. Around the edges were scattered sketches, chisels, and other sculpting tools. In one corner, an easel displayed a half-finished portrait, and the smell of dust and stone lingered in the air. Jessica immediately noticed something was off. The door had been unlocked, but the room was strangely still, and a faint smell of something metallic hung in the air. She took a step forward, her eyes scanning the surroundings, when something caught her attention, a smear of dark red on the wooden floor near the corner. Jessica crouched down and touched it, then examined her fingers. Blood. Her heart raced as she surveyed the rest of the room. The blood trail led toward a small storage cabinet against the wall. She slowly approached it and found the door slightly ajar. Inside, scattered amidst unfinished sculptures, was a delicate violin case. It wasn't Julian's violin, that much was certain. He didn't play. But it seemed odd that it would be hidden away in a storage cabinet, far from where any of the artists would typically keep their instruments. Jessica gently opened the case, revealing an exquisite violin. Its polished wood gleamed in the weak light, and it appeared to be in pristine condition. She ran her fingers lightly over the strings, noting how the instrument felt almost out of place in the otherwise chaotic environment of the studio. There was no reason for it to be here, hidden away like this. Something was off about the room, and the violin only deepened the mystery. Why would someone leave a valuable instrument like this here, in a place where it could easily be overlooked? She heard a soft rustling behind her and turned to find Olivia standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "You found something," Olivia said quietly, her gaze flicking to the violin case. There was no surprise in her voice, just an unsettling calmness. "I was about to ask you the same thing," Jessica replied, standing up. She wiped her hands on her coat, feeling the need to keep her movements composed, even though she was unnerved by the sudden appearance of Olivia in this secluded room. Olivia crossed the threshold, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. "I didn't expect you to be in here." She paused, looking around, and then her eyes settled on the violin case. Julian was never one for music. I can't imagine why he would have left something like this here. Jessica turned the case slightly, showing Olivia the violin inside. "This isn't his violin. It belongs to someone else. Do you know whose it might be?" Olivia stepped closer, examining the instrument with a faint trace of recognition. "I don't know, but I've seen it before. At least, I think I have." She shook her head. "I'm not sure. The whole place has become so chaotic since the storm started. It's hard to focus on anything." Jessica watched Olivia's face, trying to gauge her sincerity. Something about her reaction seemed off, but Jessica couldn't put her finger on it yet. The two of them stood in silence for a moment, and Jessica's mind raced. It was becoming increasingly clear that someone was hiding something. She needed to know who was hiding this violin and why it had been stashed away in Julian's studio. Olivia cleared her throat, breaking the silence. "You should talk to Nathan. He's the one who's been especially restless lately. He keeps muttering about Julian's work, claiming it's unsettling. He's been distant." "Distant?" Jessica repeated, intrigued. "From everyone?" Olivia nodded. "Yes. He hasn't spoken to anyone much in the last 2 days. He says he's just focused on his paintings, but there's something more. If you ask me, he's hiding something too." Jessica made a mental note to speak to Nathan. But before she could ask anything further, Olivia added, "Just be careful, Jessica. There are things in this house that people don't want to be found." Jessica turned back to the violin case, her mind spinning. What did Olivia know? What was she really trying to say? "I'll be careful, Olivia," Jessica replied, her voice steady. "But I'm going to get to the bottom of this." As Olivia left the room, Jessica felt a sense of urgency rise within her. The blood, the hidden violin, the cryptic note, it all seemed to be pointing towards something darker, something nobody in this retreat wanted to confront. Jessica's instincts were screaming at her to dig deeper. But the question was, who would be willing to kill to keep their secret hidden? Chapter 4. A Recital Without a Star. The storm raged outside, its furious winds sending the snow into a swirling frenzy. Inside Mapleview Cottage, the fire crackled in the hearth, offering the only warmth to the retreat's guests as they prepared for the evening's recital. The group had been strangely quiet throughout the day, each person retreating to their own rooms or avoiding eye contact during the few shared meals. It was as if the storm outside had mirrored the growing tension inside. Jessica had been pacing the living room, her mind turning over the events of the past few days. The blood, the hidden violin, the strange note, all of it pointed to something more sinister than just a simple retreat gone awry. But there was no concrete proof, only whispers, half-truths, and unexplained mysteries. And now, Julian's absence weighed heavily on the group. Clara had been doing her best to keep the mood light, but Jessica could see her growing anxiety. As the evening approached, Clara gathered everyone in the common room. "Julian won't be attending the recital tonight," she explained, her voice wavering slightly. "But the show must go on. He insisted it would be fine before he disappeared." Jessica exchanged a look with Olivia, who seemed visibly uncomfortable with the situation. Olivia's tight-lipped expression said more than words could, but she said nothing. Nathan, on the other hand, seemed oddly unaffected by the growing sense of dread hanging over the cottage. His face was pale as he stared into the fire, absently running his fingers over a paintbrush he had yet to put down. As the clock struck 7, Clara ushered everyone into the recital hall, a small, intimate space with high ceilings and soft candlelight casting long shadows. The room smelled of varnished wood, fresh flowers, and something vaguely metallic. It was a room meant for music, but tonight, it would serve a darker purpose. The stage was set. Olivia, wearing a dark green gown, took her seat at a grand piano, her fingers fluttering nervously over the keys. Nathan stood nearby, staring out the window, his expression distant, as if he could see something beyond the storm. Jessica took her seat in the front row, her eyes scanning the room. Where was Julian? Why hadn't he appeared? The room fell silent as Clara stood by the piano. We'll begin with Olivia's piano composition, Clara announced, her voice trembling. Please enjoy. Olivia's hands hovered over the keys for a moment before she began to play. The notes were soft, gentle, but the music felt heavy in the air, laden with something unspoken. As she played, Jessica watched her closely. Olivia's fingers danced across the ivory, but there was an unease in her movements, a subtle hesitation. It was as though the music was pulling something from her, a hidden tension that she could not quite escape. The piece ended abruptly, leaving the room in silence. Thank you, Olivia, Clara said, her voice strained. Next, Nathan will present his latest work. Nathan, who had barely moved during Olivia's performance, stepped forward reluctantly, his posture stiff and unnervingly rigid. As he approached the canvas on stage, Jessica noticed that his usual confidence seemed to have abandoned him. His hand shook slightly as he prepared to present his latest painting, which had been hidden behind a large cloth. He slowly pulled away the fabric to reveal a landscape, dark, tumultuous, and chaotic. It was a painting of the storm that raged outside, but the swirling winds and crashing waves were distorted, as if they were alive, reaching out toward the viewer with an unnatural force. The sky was filled with swirling clouds, and in the center of the piece, a figure stood, vaguely human but twisted and distorted, as if trapped between the worlds of reality and nightmare. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. The figure in the painting looked eerily familiar. She stared at it, her mind racing. The figure's eyes, though painted in shadow, seemed to echo something she had seen before. Something about this image didn't sit right with her. I've been working on this piece for days, Nathan said, his voice low. It's a reflection of my mind, of the chaos inside me. I wanted to capture the feeling of being trapped, of being torn apart by forces outside my control. Jessica felt a shiver run down her spine. There was a sense of madness in Nathan's words, an unsettling quality that seemed to infect the very room. She studied the painting more closely, trying to make sense of it. The more she looked, the more it seemed to come alive, its twisted shapes writhing beneath her gaze. Thank you, Nathan, Clara said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. That was powerful. A masterpiece, indeed. Jessica didn't share Clara's enthusiasm. Is this really your vision, Nathan? She asked, her voice calm but tinged with concern. Or is it something darker, something that's been festering inside you? Nathan stiffened, his face hardening. It's my work, Jessica. Don't pretend to understand it. His voice was sharp, the tension in his words rising with each syllable. I paint what I feel, what I see, what I must express. Jessica felt her pulse quicken, but she maintained her composure. She wasn't sure what was happening here, whether it was Nathan's frustration or something more ominous. But the intensity of his anger, his hostility, made her think there was more to this than a simple recital. Before she could respond, the door creaked open, and the rest of the group turned to see who had entered. It was Clara, her face pale and stricken. Julian is gone, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of the wind. I went to his studio again to check on him, but he's gone. Everything is gone, his sculpture, his tools, even the violin. It's all missing. The room fell into stunned silence. Jessica stood, her chair scraping against the floor. What do you mean, gone? She asked, her mind already racing ahead. You mean, he's disappeared? Clara nodded, her hands trembling. Yes. It's as though he vanished. His belongings are gone, and the studio looks like it's been ransacked. There's no sign of him anywhere. Jessica turned to Olivia and Nathan, both of whom exchanged uncomfortable glances. Olivia opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, Jessica raised a hand, signaling for silence. "This isn't a coincidence," she murmured. "Someone has been hiding something all along. And now, it's time to uncover the truth." Chapter 5. Whispers in the Attic. The revelation of Julian's disappearance sent shockwaves through the retreat. As Jessica stood in the dimly lit recital room, the weight of Clara's words hung heavily in the air. "His belongings are gone. The studio looks like it's been ransacked." Jessica's mind began to piece together the fragments of the mystery that were slowly unfolding before her. What was Julian hiding? What did he know that had led to his sudden vanishing? Clara's face was pale, her usual composure shattered. She seemed on the verge of tears as she fidgeted with her shawl. Olivia and Nathan, too, had stiffened, their eyes darting nervously between each other, but neither spoke. They both appeared as though they were hiding something, and Jessica's instinct told her that they were more involved than they let on. "We need to search the studio," Jessica said, her voice steady. "Clara, can you lead us there?" Clara nodded, though her expression remained troubled. She turned quickly and led the way back through the winding halls of Mapleview Cottage. The storm outside howled louder now, the wind rattling the windows like a restless ghost. As they walked toward the back of the house, Jessica's thoughts raced. Julian's disappearance couldn't be just a simple case of him leaving. Something had happened in that studio, something that someone didn't want discovered. When they arrived at the door to Julian's studio, Clara hesitated. She seemed almost reluctant to go inside, but she opened the door nonetheless. The room was eerily still, and the heavy scent of dust lingered in the air. The storms howling outside seemed muffled here, as if the cottage itself had absorbed the tension in the room. The first thing Jessica noticed was the absence of Julian's sculpture. The pedestal where it had once stood was now bare, the marble floor beneath it scuffed and marked by faint traces of red, a reminder of the blood she had seen earlier. The workbench was cluttered with tools, as if someone had left in a hurry, but everything looked strangely untouched, as though no one had been working in here for days. Jessica moved further into the room, her eyes scanning the area for anything unusual. She approached the small storage cabinet she had seen the previous day, now slightly ajar. Inside, the violin case was gone, but something else caught her eye. There, wedged behind the wooden shelves, was a small, old-fashioned ladder leading to a narrow door at the top of the room. "Clara, what's up there?" Jessica asked, pointing toward the attic entrance. Clara looked up and shuddered. "The attic," she said quietly. "It's just storage. Julian never went up there." "Then why is there a ladder?" Jessica pressed. Could it be that Julian hid something there? Clara opened her mouth to respond, but hesitated. "I don't know. He always kept to himself. If he had been hiding something, it's probably up there." Without waiting for permission, Jessica grabbed the ladder and began to climb. The wooden steps creaked under her weight, but she managed to reach the small door at the top. She paused for a moment, glancing back down at Clara, Olivia, and Nathan, who had gathered below, watching her intently. "I'll be quick," Jessica assured them, her voice calm. With one final push, she opened the door and stepped into the attic. The attic was a dusty, dimly lit space. The only light came from a small, grimy window that was half covered by snow outside. Boxes, old furniture, and piles of forgotten memories were stacked haphazardly around the room. Jessica moved carefully between the piles, her sharp eyes scanning the area for anything that stood out. It was when she turned a corner near the far wall that she found it, an old, weathered chest. It was locked, but the key was dangling on a rusty nail beside it. Jessica picked up the key, her fingers trembling slightly with anticipation. She unlocked the chest and opened it slowly. Inside was a collection of old papers, photographs, and journals. Jessica's heart skipped a beat as she began to sift through them. Some were yellowed with age, others were newly written, but all seemed to point toward something bigger than anyone had realized. She pulled out one of the journals and opened it to the first page. It was Julian's handwriting, sloppy and frantic, as if he were in a rush to document something. "They're closing in on me. I thought I could escape, but I can't. The paintings, the sculptures, they know what I've done. I thought I was the only one who understood the secret, but now I see. I've been followed, and I don't know who to trust anymore." Jessica's pulse quickened. What had Julian gotten himself into? She turned the page, her eyes scanning more of his words. "Olivia, Nathan, Clara, none of them can know. Not yet. The truth about the art, the truth about the man I once was, it's all coming to light. If I don't hide it now, everything will be lost." The words were disjointed, filled with desperation. It was clear that Julian had been hiding something far deeper than the simple artistic rivalry that had been hinted at in their earlier conversations. The mention of the truth about the art was particularly striking. What was Julian referring to? What had he uncovered about the pieces he had been working on? Jessica closed the journal, her mind racing. She had stumbled upon something significant, something Julian had tried to conceal. But the question now was, what was so dangerous that he had felt the need to hide it? And why had he disappeared after writing these cryptic entries? As Jessica pondered these questions, she heard footsteps below, and Clara's voice calling up to her. "Jessica? Is everything all right?" Jessica tucked the journal under her arm and quickly descended the ladder. She felt the weight of the truth pressing down on her. This was no longer a simple case of a missing artist. Julian's disappearance, the strange note, the blood, everything was connected. The question now was who was involved, and what they were willing to do to keep the secrets of Mapleview Cottage buried. Chapter 6. A Cello Secret. The storm outside had begun to ease, but the atmosphere inside Mapleview Cottage was still charged with tension. Jessica descended from the attic, clutching Julian's journal, her mind swirling with the cryptic words she had read. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together, but there was still something missing. What was Julian hiding? What had he discovered that was so dangerous? She was halfway down the corridor when Clara appeared at the far end of the hall. Her face was drawn, eyes wide with concern, but there was something else in her gaze, something deeper, more guarded. As Jessica approached, Clara stiffened, her expression tightening as if she had been caught in the act of thinking something private. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Jessica, but I need to speak with you," Clara said, her voice low and hurried. "Of course," Jessica replied, her heart still racing with the discovery she'd made in the attic. "What's happened now?" Clara glanced around as if checking to ensure they were alone. She motioned for Jessica to follow her down the hallway, away from the others. There's something you need to know. Something that I haven't told you yet. Something I've kept hidden." Jessica's curiosity piqued. She followed Clara into a small, dimly lit room near the back of the cottage. The walls were lined with old bookshelves, and a faded rug covered the floor. The room seemed like a quiet sanctuary, but now, in the midst of the storm and Julian's disappearance, it felt like a confessional. Clara turned to face Jessica, her hands trembling. "There's something in the cellar, something I didn't think was important at first, but now I believe it might be connected to Julian." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "What's in the cellar, Clara?" Clara hesitated, biting her lip before she spoke again. "A cello. Julian's cello. It's been there for years, hidden away in a crate, but I thought it was just a forgotten relic from his past. I didn't realize until now that it might be important." "A cello?" Jessica repeated, puzzled. "Why would that be important?" "I don't know," Clara said, her voice cracking. "But when I went down there last night, I heard it. The cello, someone had been playing it." Jessica's pulse quickened. "And you think it was Julian?" Clara shook her head. "No, I don't think it was him. I don't know who it was. But the sound came from the cellar, and when I went to check, the door was locked. I couldn't get in, but I'm certain I heard the music, someone was playing, and it wasn't Julian." The chill of the storm outside seemed to creep into the room as Clara's words settled over Jessica. A cello, hidden away in the cellar, and someone playing it in the dead of night. It seemed too strange to be a coincidence, and it only added to the growing mystery surrounding Julian's disappearance. "We need to go down there," Jessica said, her mind already working through the possibilities. "If someone was in the cellar, then we need to find out who and why." Clara nodded, her face pale but determined. "Follow me." They made their way down the hall and into the basement, the stone walls of the cellar feeling cold and oppressive. The door creaked as Clara unlocked it, and they descended into the darkness, the faint light of a single bulb above casting long shadows on the walls. The air smelled damp and musty, and Jessica's boots crunched against the cold concrete floor as they made their way further into the room. At the far corner of the cellar, a large wooden crate sat covered in dust. It was placed against the wall, almost deliberately out of sight. Jessica approached it cautiously, and Clara followed close behind, her breath shallow as she watched Jessica open the crate. Inside, nestled among old blankets and packing material, was the cello. It was an exquisite instrument, made of fine wood, and appeared to be in excellent condition. But as Jessica examined it, something caught her eye, a faint scuff mark on the side, as if it had been dragged across the floor. "It's as if someone was trying to hide it," Jessica murmured, running her fingers along the cello's smooth surface. She paused, feeling something strange, a hidden compartment near the base of the instrument. Carefully, she pried open the hidden compartment, and inside, she found a small, folded piece of paper. Clara gasped as Jessica unfolded the paper. The handwriting on the note was messy, almost frantic, and the words seemed to spill across the page in a hurry. "The music will reveal what was lost. It's time for the truth to come to light." Jessica's heart skipped a beat. The cryptic message seemed to tie everything together. The strange notes in Julian's journals, the hidden violin, and now this. What truth was being referred to? What was Julian trying to uncover, and why was he hiding it so desperately? This note. Clara's voice trailed off as she looked at the paper, her hands shaking. "I don't understand. What is all of this about?" "I think it's clear now," Jessica said, her voice steady as she pieced the puzzle together. Julian discovered something about the art here, about the pieces that have been created, something that he wasn't supposed to find. This cello is part of that mystery. I don't know exactly what it is yet, but I'm getting closer. Clara looked uncertain, her gaze flicking between Jessica and the cello. "What do we do now?" "We need to confront the others," Jessica said, her mind already working through the next steps. "There's no more time to waste. Julian's disappearance isn't just about an artist going missing. It's about a secret. And I believe the answer lies in the art that has been created in this house." With the cello and the note in hand, Jessica made her way back up the stairs. Clara followed closely behind, her expression troubled, but Jessica could tell that she was beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. The storm outside seemed to mirror the storm brewing inside the cottage. The truth was coming, but with it came a wave of danger that no one in this house was prepared for. Chapter 7. Unmasking the Imposter. The storm had calmed by the time Jessica made her way back to the common room. But the unease in the air was palpable, thicker than the fog that now blanketed the grounds of Mapleview Cottage. Each step felt heavier, as if the weight of the truth that was beginning to unfold pressed down on her, demanding to be revealed. She couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that someone here knew more than they were letting on. As Jessica walked through the hall, she could hear the faint murmur of voices coming from the sitting room. Clara had gone to find Olivia and Nathan, no doubt to tell them about the discovery in the cellar. Jessica had a feeling that whatever they were about to uncover would shatter the fragile facade that held this group together. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. Olivia and Nathan were seated on opposite sides of the room, both looking uncomfortable. Olivia's fingers tapped nervously on the armrest of her chair, while Nathan stared into the fire, his eyes distant and unfocused. Clara, looking even more pale than before, stood near the window, her hands wringing in silent anxiety. Jessica didn't waste time with pleasantries. She placed the cello and the note she'd found in the attic on the table between them. The faint scent of wood and dust still clung to the instrument, but it was the note that caught everyone's attention. They all looked at it in silence, the weight of its cryptic message hanging over them. "This was hidden inside the cello," Jessica began, her voice calm but firm. "The note says, the music will reveal what was lost. It's time for the truth to come to light." Julian wrote it, and it's clear he was trying to uncover something. But he didn't do it alone. Someone here knows more about the art, the cello, and what's been hidden. Clara glanced up at Jessica, her face a mixture of confusion and fear. "I don't understand. What does this have to do with Julian disappearing? Why would he leave all of this behind?" "Because Julian was getting too close," Jessica replied. "He uncovered something about the art created here, something that someone wanted to keep buried. And I think that someone is sitting in this room right now." Nathan's eyes flicked up from the fire, and for the first time, his gaze was sharp, focused. "You're accusing one of us?" he asked, his voice low and tense. "We're all artists here, Jessica. What could we possibly be hiding?" Jessica didn't flinch. "I'm not accusing anyone yet, Nathan, but the truth is staring us all in the face. You see, this cello isn't just a relic of Julian's past. It's connected to a secret, one that involves all of you." Olivia stiffened in her chair. "What do you mean by that?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but there was a nervous tremor in it that Jessica couldn't ignore. "Olivia, Nathan, Clara," Jessica said, her eyes locking onto each of them in turn. "You've all been hiding something. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm going to find out." Clara looked away, her face reddening. She seemed torn, as though she wanted to confess, but the words wouldn't come. Olivia, however, remained silent, her expression hardening. Nathan's jaw clenched, and his fingers curled into fists at his sides. "I know you think I'm crazy," Jessica continued, her voice unwavering. "But I've seen it in all of you. The way you've been avoiding certain questions, the way you've kept your distance. You all have something to hide, and Julian was getting too close to the truth." Olivia opened her mouth to speak, but Jessica held up a hand, silencing her. "I know about the forgeries," she said quietly, but firmly. The room went deathly silent. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Olivia's eyes widened, and Nathan shot to his feet, his face flushed with anger. "Forged paintings," Jessica continued, her gaze never leaving Nathan, who was now pacing near the window. "Julian discovered something about them. He found evidence of stolen works, pieces that were sold as originals but were actually forged." Clara gasped. "What? No. That's impossible." "It's not impossible, Clara," Jessica said, her voice calm but insistent. "I've seen the signs, and I've pieced it all together. The cello, the hidden compartments, the strange behavior, it's all linked. Julian discovered that someone in this house was forging art, and I believe that's why he was targeted." Olivia stood up, shaking her head in disbelief. "You're accusing us of being criminals? We're artists. This is insane." Her voice broke with the last word, and for a moment, Jessica saw the fear in her eyes. "No," Jessica replied. "I'm not accusing anyone, but I am asking questions. Why was Julian so obsessed with discovering the truth? Why did he isolate himself? Why did he keep to himself about his findings?" Nathan stopped pacing and looked directly at Jessica. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Julian didn't know anything. He was paranoid, obsessed. He started thinking everyone was after him after his work. He started seeing things that weren't there. That's why he left. That's why he disappeared. Is that so?" Jessica asked, her tone steady. "Then why did he leave behind that journal? Why did he hide the cello in the cellar? Why did he leave a note in the first place?" Nathan's eyes flickered for a moment, and Jessica caught the slight twitch of his hand. It was enough of a giveaway to know that he was lying. His anger wasn't just frustration, it was a defensive reaction. Because he knew the truth was too dangerous to reveal, Jessica continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. He knew it was too much for anyone to handle. The silence in the room was thick, suffocating. Clara and Olivia exchanged uneasy glances, both of them avoiding Jessica's gaze. Nathan stood with his back to the group, his face hidden in shadow. But even in the dim light, Jessica could see the tension in his posture. It was a posture that told her everything she needed to know. "This isn't over," Jessica said quietly. "The truth will come to light, no matter how hard you try to hide it." With those words, she turned and left the room, leaving the group in stunned silence. The storm had passed, but the storm inside Mapleview Cottage was far from over. The truth was within reach, and Jessica Fletcher wasn't going to stop until she uncovered it. Chapter 8. Truth Beneath the Stage. The next morning, the calm after the storm felt almost surreal. The thick clouds of tension that had descended upon Mapleview Cottage still hung in the air, and Jessica could feel the weight of the secrets each of them was keeping. She had expected some form of resistance, but what she had uncovered was more than she'd imagined. The hidden forgery ring, the desperation of Julian's search for the truth, these were not the secrets of a simple artist retreat. Something darker was at play, and the only way to bring the truth to light was to expose the players behind it all. Jessica knew that the final confrontation had to happen sooner rather than later. The storm had passed, but the storm inside the cottage was far from over. She couldn't let the lies continue, not with the pieces of the puzzle so clearly laid out before her. She spent the morning reviewing the journals, the cello, and the notes. It all pointed back to one thing: art forgery, and the lengths to which the people at Mapleview Cottage would go to protect their secrets. Julian had stumbled upon the truth and paid the price for it. But his disappearance was only the beginning. There was more to uncover, and Jessica was determined to find it. After a light lunch, Jessica gathered Clara, Olivia, and Nathan in the sitting room. Clara, who had been visibly shaken the previous evening, now appeared more composed, but there was still a flicker of fear in her eyes. Olivia, on the other hand, seemed withdrawn, her usual sharpness replaced by a quiet intensity. Nathan stood near the window, his face shadowed, as if he could sense the coming confrontation but wasn't ready to face it. "I think it's time we end this," Jessica said, her voice firm but calm. "You all know by now that I've uncovered Julian's secret. But what you don't know is that I've also uncovered the deeper secret that this house has been hiding for years. Clara shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her hands twisting the fabric of her shawl. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I mean that the art here, Julian's sculptures, Nathan's paintings, Olivia's poems, were never meant to be the work of just one artist, Jessica replied. You've all been part of something bigger than you realize. Something far darker than you wanted to admit. Olivia's eyes narrowed, but she didn't speak. Nathan, however, couldn't contain his anger any longer. He stepped forward, his fist clenched. You don't know what you're talking about, Jessica. You have no idea what's really been going on here. Julian was a paranoid fool, and his obsession with the truth got him into trouble. That's all there is to it. Jessica held up her hand, silencing him. I know exactly what's been going on here, Nathan, and I know you're involved in it. I've seen the evidence. She placed Julian's journal and the cello note on the table between them. Julian knew about the forgeries. He knew that Nathan had been stealing ideas, claiming them as his own. And Olivia, you've been complicit in it all, covering up the truth with your poetry, masking the real stories behind the art. The pieces you created, whether you knew it or not, were never meant to be yours. Nathan's eyes flashed with fury, but he didn't speak. Olivia, however, stood still, her face pale and tight with suppressed emotion. Jessica could see it now, the guilt in her eyes, the awareness that she had been part of something much darker than she ever intended. I never wanted it to go this far, Olivia said, her voice breaking. But Julian, he was getting too close. I tried to stop him, but it was already too late. I thought if I just kept quiet, if I played along, maybe it would all just go away. But it didn't. Jessica took a deep breath, her eyes focused on the trio in front of her. That's why Julian left, she said softly. He couldn't let the forgeries go on any longer. He wanted to expose you all, but he knew it would destroy everything you'd built here. He tried to warn you, but you didn't listen. Clara's face crumpled with emotion, her hand pressed to her mouth as if trying to hold back her tears. I never knew. I never suspected that Julian was hiding such a terrible truth, she whispered. The truth is often hidden behind what we choose to believe, Jessica said. But Julian couldn't hide from it anymore. He couldn't let it destroy him, and he certainly couldn't let it destroy the rest of you. A long silence settled over the room. The weight of Jessica's words hung in the air, a truth so undeniable that even Nathan seemed to shrink under its weight. He was still tense, still angry, but there was something in his eyes now, a flicker of realization. Finally, it was Clara who broke the silence. What do we do now? Her voice was small, barely audible. Jessica took a long pause before answering. We need to face the consequences. Julian knew the truth, and now the truth is out. There's no running from it. You all have to answer for what's been done, for the lives you've ruined, for the art you've stolen. It's time to make things right. Nathan's shoulders sagged as he exhaled sharply. Olivia, too, looked defeated, her posture slumping as she folded her arms tightly across her chest. Clara, however, looked almost relieved, as though she had been waiting for someone to take charge, to finally confront the reality they had all been avoiding. For the first time since Jessica had arrived at Mapleview Cottage, she felt the oppressive weight of the storm inside the house begin to lift. The truth, no matter how painful, had been exposed. And now, the consequences would follow. Jessica stood up, feeling the weight of what she had uncovered settle into her bones. I'll be in touch with the authorities. It's time for this house to answer for its secrets. As she turned to leave the room, Jessica glanced out the window. The sky was clearing, and the storm had finally passed. But the storm inside Mapleview Cottage had only just begun. The truth would have its reckoning, and Jessica Fletcher would be there to make sure of it.